that it does its job, there's a task that it does the best, which is reasoning or completing the next token. So, about 2 years ago, we proposed this RAG triad. We think it is important to compartmentalize and then to decompose the sort of like at the time QA task into three major components: query, response, and the context. Right. So if we think about an agent, a system that has to retrieve from your knowledge base, from your source of knowledge, from your source of data, then generally you will perform query decomposition, understanding the query, retrieve the context using some sort of retrieval system, whether that be similarity search, semantic search, hybrid search. This is just, in general, this is just you have to retrieve some piece of context and then make sure the LLM has access to that. The best analogy I like the most is from Andrea Caparsi, is that LLM has a vague recollection of knowledge of the world, right? The world knowledge. However, it doesn't necessarily know how to distinguish what are their working memories. Like, for example, if you want to retrieve a specific, very, very specific, obscure fact, and then you want it to be able to generate very detailed, very accurate, very grounded analysis based on those specific facts. Right? So that's why we think this is how we kind of like describe the context pieces. This is just, it could be the retrieve document, it could be retrieve rows from your DB, like structured data, and then finally the response pieces is just a final generated tokens. So there are a few metrics that we thought at the time were fairly important for a RAG-based systems. Is your retrieve context relevant to the query? Obviously, are your responses supported by the context? This is oftentimes and then your final answer still has to be relevant to the query, right? Because you can have something that is fully grounded, but if your LLM during the very last step in the agentic workflow, it somehow twisted or somehow forgets about the original query of the user, or it's sort of like misconstrue the original query intention, then your final answer will not be relevant, right? And then that will be sort of catastrophic in production use cases because your agent can be very long running. They can take, it can take anywhere from minutes to several hours, several days to complete a task, super complicated task, and then it came back with a final sequences of token that is not even relevant to the original question. And context, so going back to the pragmatic world, data agents, the way we define data agent is kind of like an autonomous or almost semi-autonomous system that it will connect to different data sources, understand your query, sometimes it will be SQL queries, and then try to express, the user might express that in natural language, or sometimes it will still be in machine code or higher level code. And then it will try to plan, perform actions, such as data retrieval. It could write a SQL for you, execute a SQL in your DB engine if allowed, if you have the proper RBAC set up for that, and then finally perform analysis, insight extractions, chart generation, or visualizations. So taking a data agents as a kind of like a case study, we have obviously the deep research mode from ChatGPT from a while ago, I believe a year ago, and then we have a Snowflake. We also have something similar. It's called Snowflake Intelligence. What it does compared to other commercial offering is that it actually connects to your enterprise data, try to come up with an optimized view of the semantic of your enterprise databases or your schemas or your different layers of your DB. For example, it can be the descriptions of your columns, some metadata around how your indices were created, and Snowflake Intelligence built on top of those give you a agentic view of those things. So that allows you effectively to talk to your data, which I will have a demo in a few minutes. So let's see. This will be a demo later. So how the agent works, right? So I sort of kind of talking all over the place about memory, reflections, and all that. But back to the topic. The reason we coined this term, what's your agent's GPA, is actually we observe a nice decomposition of agentic workflow of three core components, which is goal and plan and actions or act. The empirical results, which I will show, are all of the high impact error. So high impact error in the agentic traces, you can imagine things like resource exhaustion. Go ahead, sorry.
I was thinking on the previous slide at point 4A and 4B, and quality tool selection. What are, in your opinion, the factors that change that? For example, like kind of LLM, system prompt, or description of the tools. Why the tool selection change? Is better or worse? What are the factors?
Yeah, great question. So if I capture the question correctly, you meant have we observed, right, empirically, what would be the critical kind of like varying factors here in tool selection? Is that correct?